You know, there's something fitting about recording this episode from the Sugar Bowl Tavern here in Northern Elsweyr. In all taverns in ESO, you can hear fires crackling, smell of mead in the air, and particularly here in Northern Elsweyr, a few Khajiit bards wandering in and out with a lute that's slightly out of tune. And honestly, this is the perfect place to talk about solo play. Because taverns in ESO in general have always kind of felt like a home base for wanderers, people who explore Tamriel on their own terms, people who do not need a full group behind them to take on the world. In 2026, this is going to be their year because the new Overland difficulty settings, we also have the first wave of solo dungeons. ESO is finally giving solo players the challenge, the danger, and kind of the respect a lot of them have been asking for since the launch of the game. Welcome back to episode 8 of the Tamriel Report, broadcasting today from the Sugar Bowl Tavern, your cozy little corner of Northern Elsweyr. Grab a seat, grab a drink, and let's talk about the bigger conversations happening across the ESO community. Because today's topic is a big one. For the first time in a long time, solo players aren't just being acknowledged, they're being supported. We're getting difficulty settings that make the world dangerous again. We're getting solo versions of dungeons that were locked behind really more group-oriented play for over a decade. And we're also getting a version of ESO that finally feels like it's evolving to match the way people are playing the game nowadays. So today we're going to slow down, enjoy the atmosphere here in the Sugar Bowl Tavern, and talk about why 2026 might be the single best year ESO has ever had for solo adventurers. Let's start with something that's been true for a long time. ESO has always been solo friendly, but not necessarily solo challenging. You can quest alone, you can explore alone, you can do delves alone. And when one Tamriel was introduced into the game, it really brought solo play kind of into the light when it comes to how you could play the Elder Scrolls Online, because you could go anywhere you wanted and you could do it by yourself. But the world really hasn't pushed back that much in years. Overland enemies melt in seconds, delve enemies melt in seconds. Public dungeons are basically kind of scenic tours for most veteran players that have played for a really long time. And for players who wanted danger, tension, or a sense of accomplishment, the game didn't really offer much unless you stepped into group content. So when the devs announced Overland difficulty settings and solo dungeons, it wasn't just a feature update. It was kind of a shift in how they wanted the game to play in the future for everyone. It was the developers and the team there at ZA saying, we're ready to make the world feel alive again. And this will help out with everyone, not just necessarily solo players. Overland difficulty will be enjoyed by people that want to play in groups. Of course, most dungeons in the game you can already solo if you prefer to. Some, unfortunately, you cannot because of the mechanics. But overall, I think adding solo versions of these dungeons are going to be a bit different. They're going to have the option for you to get some different items. They're going to have, of course, the ability for you to play the story and explore at your own pace. And this is one of the biggest changes ESO has made in a while when it comes to solo players. We're getting multiple difficulties or difficulty options for the Overland experience. You can have things like the easiest setting, which we have in the game right now. So your classic ESO experience, which would be Adventure. This is the version of the game we've all played forever. Enemies go down fast, you feel powerful, and the world is accessible to everyone. Then you can go all the way up to Vestige. Of course, there will be some other levels in between here, but Vestige will be your hardest difficulty level. This is where things will be a lot more interesting. Enemies will hit harder, they're going to take longer to kill, and you're actually going to have to pay attention to mechanics. We've all missed the mechanics pretty much of anything in the open world because it dies so quickly, but a lot of these enemies all have mechanics they go through, and you will start to experience those in, of course, Vestige difficulty. And of course, this will apply to things like overland zones, delves, public dungeons, and story instances. So if you are a solo player looking for a bit more of a challenge, you're definitely going to have that option when this comes out, of course, in Update 50. This is the first time since the launch of ESO that the world will really feel dangerous. Now, if you played the game when it first came out, I'm sure some of you have been around as long as I have, you do remember going into Craglorn with those veteran ranks. And Craglorn was kind of that in-game zone that everyone got to after they completed the story. And it was a bit dangerous. I mean, you could die easily. You could die quickly. And I remember when I first started playing the game, even going into 4-man like dungeons. Like some of the easiest dungeons in game now were extremely difficult then. The game just felt a bit different when it was harder. It was a lot more challenging. It was a lot more interesting. And if you're someone that doesn't really get into, let's say, veteran dungeons or even trials, because maybe you like to play by yourself. Maybe you don't have, a big group or a big guild to play with or something like that. You don't get to experience the harder content in game. And that is, of course, a bit of a letdown for some solo players. So difficulty really isn't just about challenge. It's about immersion a lot, in my opinion, too. When the world pushes back, you feel connected to it. You feel like you're actually out adventuring. You're not just mowing down mobs on autopilot. And for story players, this is also a big one. Imagine doing a main quest where the enemies actually feel like threats again. Imagine delves where you have to think about, how many enemies you're going to encounter and kind of pull at one time in a certain room. Or in public dungeons where you can't just sprint through the entire map from boss to boss in just a couple of seconds. This is going to change the feel of the entire game. Not, like I said, not just for solo players, but for everyone. Now let's talk about one of the other big changes, and that is solo dungeons. For the first time ever, ESO is creating a true solo version of group dungeons, starting with, of course, Moonhunter Keep and March of Sacrifice. I'm hoping this is going to be something that they continue to add pretty often into the game. They're not just going to only have a few solo dungeons added in every year. I'm hoping we get a large amount of these by the end of this year. They're not scaled down versions, but they're being rebalanced, retuned, and redesigned specifically for solo play. So you can go in with your companion and actually have a solo dungeon experience, not like the one you can have right now if you just go in and solo a 4-man dungeon. This is something players have been asking for a long time. We've seen this talked about by the devs in the past. We've seen it, of course, on forums and in comments for years now. ESO's dungeon stories are some of the best narrative content in-game. Now, not every dungeon has an insane story, but some of them are really good. And a lot of players don't really get to experience that properly because dungeon groups are going through so quickly. People are skipping dialogue, bosses are getting melted, you're getting rushed or pulled through to different parts of the dungeon itself from boss to boss, and you're not really getting to experience that story as a whole. And if you are a solo kind of story-driven player, you're going to miss out on a lot here with this. So solo dungeons will fix that. You can take your time, you can listen to dialogue, you can explore every single corner of that dungeon, and you actually can experience the story the way it was meant to be told, if that is the kind of thing you enjoy doing. Now, I know that's not going to be everyone in the game. Not everyone is going to want to experience these stories in a solo version. But for the solo players out there, and as we all know, there are a lot of them in ESO now, this is going to be a big thing for them. The conversation kind of gets interesting here because, like I said, solo players do make up a massive portion of ESO's population. And I think it's a lot bigger than most people realize. If you listen to anyone nowadays that plays the game compared to 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, it used to be you always heard people say that, they were in trial groups. They were in, groups playing PvP. It was a lot of that in-game focused stuff where you played with other people. And for years now, especially the last about 3 or 4, maybe even longer than that, when you hear people talking about playing ESO, it's always the question, "Hey, I play solo. What content can I do?" That is a question a lot of people ask before they even start playing. You see that question a lot on Reddit, on the forums, on social media. Then you start seeing players that maybe you didn't even know that played solo for years start saying that Overland got too easy, and that's kind of why they quit playing. So this shows you that solo player base has grown, and in my opinion, probably one of the biggest groups overall that's in the game, even to this day. To me, it seems like in the last, really since 2020, 5 or 6 years, I think the solo player base may possibly be as big or bigger than the other player bases in the game in general, because we know the PvP player base has shrunk over the years. The in-game trial groups have shrunk over the years on all platforms, not just console or PC. It feels like to me that the housing community, people that like to go in and build, houses and decorate, has grown a lot. And also those solo adventurers, people that come from games like Oblivion, Skyrim, and Morrowind, have really exploded inside of ESO, just in general. And for the first time, ESO has truly embraced solo adventurers as a core part of the game, not just kind of a optional playstyle. The game has always been labeled play how you want, but that's not always been the case in a lot of players' minds. They don't feel like that was always the choice. They felt like you could play like you wanted in some ways, but maybe not every way. When you look at everything the devs have announced this year, Tamriel tomes, challenge difficulty, solo dungeons, class masteries, dynamic world events, for me, I'm kind of seeing a pattern here. Once again, and I've talked about this a lot in videos here on the channel, ESO is evolving away from what it used to be. It's becoming something completely different. It's becoming more flexible, more player-driven, more supportive of different playstyles. And that's what makes 2026 so exciting to me. We've had a lot of great changes that the devs have talked about that they're implementing into the game. But the way the game is evolving overall is very interesting. And it's not just about new content anymore. It's about a new philosophy of what the devs want for the player base. ESO is finally building systems that let you play the game the way you really want to play it. And that's not just kind of their slogan. It's really becoming a true thing now. So here's the bottom line. If you're a solo player, or if you've ever wished ESO felt a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more immersive, a little bit more rewarding, this might be the year that you enjoy in the game the most. Overland Difficulty is going to change the feel of the entire world. Solo dungeons, as long as they're handled correctly and they continue to add them into the game long term, this is going to open up stories that were locked behind group play for decades. And together they make 2026 one of the most interesting and biggest years ESO has ever had for solo adventurers. Let me know what you think. Are you planning on playing, of course, the Overland difficulty content in adventure? Are you planning on maybe just knocking it up a difficulty level or 2? Or are you looking for a real challenge and going all the way to Vestige? If you are a solo player, are you excited for these solo dungeons? And do you think this is a great direction for solo players? Is this what ESO needed? Because like I said, the solo player base has grown massively over the last several years. And I think, like I said, it's a lot bigger than most people think. And I've always kind of felt that ESO would head in a single player kind of driven idea eventually because of that mass solo player base. Like I said, you just don't have, unfortunately, the PvP groups and guilds that you used to. You don't have the in-game trial players that we used to. And I'm hoping we can get back to that point. I'm hoping one day ESO becomes that true play how you want game. So if you're a PvP fan, a trial fan, a dungeon fan, a solo fan, it does not matter. There will be enough content in the game for however you want to play to occupy your time, as long as you want to hop in and play ESO. And I think that's what the devs are trying to do. It's just taken a really long time for us to get to this point. Thanks for hanging out with me here in the Sugar Bowl Tavern. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you hit the like button. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.